Always, we're being joined, or as always, I want to thank everybody for hopping on to the program. Um, I just want to make sure before we start, let you guys know Neil will be on the program. Going to join us a little bit later. I'm sure Neil's getting his coffee and getting everything ready. I want to thank Steeler fans for supporting the program and hopping onto the show. Want to thank Steelers Freak for jumping in already with the hot take and the hot question. So big up to Steelers Freak. Before we jump into the program, want to say if you want to find the program in podcast form, make sure you go to your most popular podcast feeder and do a search for the new standard and Lance Williams or the new standard Steelers and Neil Coulong. Also, if you want to join the program and experience the show live and not just get the audio, go to YouTube and do a search for the new standard, and please like and subscribe to the show. Also, want to thank everybody out there for just supporting the program each and every week. Also, want to wish everybody out there a safe Independence Day weekend. Please do it safely if you're doing with fireworks and stuff and things of that nature. Make sure you're safe in terms of how you do that. Big up to Ollie Howard, species 5618. And in this particular show, and I want to wait a little bit because I know Neil is hopping on, and I definitely want to get his perspective, given the fact that he has some inside intel on how play calling is done for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I want to wait in terms of that. Um, but also, before we do that, I want to talk about some other things in terms of the Steelers, in terms of some things that I wanted to talk about on the show. So I'll hop to that first before we talk about the main topic of the show, which is Tomlin really giving up play calling duties? And and I want to jump into a couple of rankings that came out this week. Ted Wynn of The Athletic ranked the Steelers' skill positions, and ESPN ranked the Steelers' roster overall. And I want to jump into that first before we talk about the skill positions. And let me pull the article up here. ESPN had the Steelers roster rated number 22 in the National Football League. And big up to Ali Howard species when he said, "Be safe, no more Jason Pierre Pauls, please." Meaning, do not have or do not do anything stupid when it comes to fireworks. And as I scroll through ESPN's list, ESPN had the Steelers at 22nd. And before I give you my thoughts and my perspective on that, I want to give you how they ranked the AFC North. So if I scroll through here, the number one roster in the AFC North, if I'm not mistaken, is the Cleveland Browns. They had the Cleveland Browns at 6, and they said that the biggest strength of the Cleveland Browns, pick up the mail, is that few teams have invested more in their offensive line than the Browns, and few teams have a better running back room than Cleveland. The result is one of the most devastating rushing attacks in the NFL. The Browns have averaged 4.8 yards per rushing attempt the past 2 seasons under coach Kevin Stepnoski. I would agree with that. I mean, I think that is their strength. So the number one roster in the division, according to ESPN, is the Cleveland Browns. And I think we would all probably agree with that. I think the biggest question for the Cleveland Browns right now is what is going to be the playing status of Deshaun Watson? If Deshaun Watson comes back with their roster, they're going to be tough. The second best roster in the division is the Cincinnati Bengals. And according to ESPN, they said Cincinnati's passing game blossomed with Burrow and Chase. Vertical plays were Burrow's Achilles heel as a rookie, as he completed just 9 of 48 attempts, a 20 plus, throwing to Chase alone. Burrow completed 15 of 34, and that connection was absolutely devastating. I think we can agree. I think you look at the skill positions of the Cincinnati Bengals. That wide receiver room is absolutely devastating. Big up to Reginald Rivers. Thank you for hopping in. Big up to everybody in Bartlett, Tennessee. Their skill positions are devastating. You put Mixon, you put Chase, you put Burrow, Tyler Boyd. Uh, that is a devastating Usama if he comes back, or maybe Usama got traded. Correct me if I'm wrong. Um, Devastating skill positions. So the number one roster in terms of ESPN, the AFC North, is Cleveland at 6, which is 6 overall in the National Football League. Cincinnati at 8. And as I scroll through here again, the Steelers, and then they have the Baltimore Ravens at 12. So the rankings are 6, 8, and 12. And they cited that the biggest strength of the Baltimore Ravens uh, is that there's not their secondary. They're talking about how good their secondary that it was hit with injury, but they're talking about their trio of safeties. They're talking about their depth when everybody comes back in terms of their secondary, and they're talking about their versatility on defense. And last but not least, the Pittsburgh Steelers are ranked 22. And so when I looked at this at first, I thought with just a general fanboy perspective that ESPN is hating. I went to straight defensive Steeler fan mode and said ESPN is hating. But are they hating? And before I jump into my thoughts on what they cited as the biggest strengths and weaknesses of the Steelers, I want to pose this question to you guys in the chat and to everybody listening to the program. Are the rankings fair? Browns 6, Bengals 8, Ravens 12, and Steelers 22. Give me your thoughts in the chat. Do you think those rankings from an NFL perspective are legitimate? And secondly, do you think the Steelers have, according to ESPN, the worst roster in the AFC North? Now, taking a step back, when you add in the quarterback position, now this is assuming that Deshaun Watson is going to play this year. If Deshaun Watson plays this year, Mitch Trubisky is the worst starting quarterback, and I'm assuming that Mitch Trubisky is going to be the starter. It is not going to be Kenny Pickett, because if Kenny Pickett starts, the Steelers will not make the playoffs. You do not want a rookie starting, not with this roster. And so if Deshaun Watson is suspended, or if he plays, just let's say, Mitch Trubisky is the worst quarterback in the division. If Deshaun Watson gets suspended for a substantial amount of time, which it seems as if it's alluding to, the Steelers, Mitch Trubisky is the third best quarterback in the division. So with that being said, when you balance out the importance of the quarterback position just in how you're looking at a roster and how good a roster is, because you have a quarterback like Mitch Trubisky, it's going to put you very low in terms of a roster ranking. Also, I think the reason why, well, let me just say this before I get into my comments. Let me just jump into what ESPN said. And they said the following: it's hard to find many better duos on the defensive front than TJ Watt and Cam Hayward. Over the past 3 seasons, Both Watt and Hayward rank among the top three players at their respective positions in both quarterback pressures and run stops. Their abilities to make impact plays, regardless of the situation, is at the center of the Pittsburgh's defensive success over the last 3 years. Biggest weaknesses. The Steelers' offensive line has deteriorated from a unit that 5+ years ago was one of the best in the league under Mike Munchak. Now it profiles closer to the bottom of the league. This group was aided in pass protection by Ben Roethlisberger's 2.2 second average time to throw over the past 2 seasons, fastest in the NFL, making, however, it fares in what should be a difference-looking 2022 offense something worth monitoring. X factors. Ahkello Witherspoon signed to remain in the Pittsburgh doesn't scream number one outside corner, but that's what the Steelers are counting on for him to be. From week 13 through the end of the season, Witherspoon allowed a passer rating of just 20.2 on throws into his coverage. His play has been hot and cold throughout his 5-year career, but the Steelers will be hoping he carries that momentum into 2022. So, and big up to Steeler Wide 360 Nation, North Side in the house, Manchester, baby, 15233. Let's go. And before I give my thoughts on the roster, let me just read off what ESPN has as the suspected starting offense and defense for the Steelers. At the quarterback position, Mitch Trubisky, Najee Harris, Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, Pat Freiermuth, Zach Gentry, Dan Moore Jr., Dotson, Cole, James Daniels, Chucks Okorafor. On the defensive side, Cam Hayward, Chris Wormley, Tyson Alualu, TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, Miles Jack, Devin Bush, Ahkello Witherspoon, Levi Wallace, Cameron Sutton, Minka Fitzpatrick, Terrell Edwards. Now, I don't disagree with the 22nd. I think when you look at the Steelers roster, particularly when you look at the offensive line and that is completely retooled, and the fact that you're starting a quarterback in a 32 team league that is probably in the bottom third, that automatically makes your roster a bottom third roster. I'm honestly surprised that they have the Steeler roster at 22nd. Some teams that they have below them are Arizona, the New York Jets, Detroit Lions, New York Giants. When you're close to the Jets in roster, and when you look at the roster on the offensive side, I think Mel said it best. It is unproven. It is absolutely unproven. And when you look at it, and I say the names Trubisky, Harris, Claypool, Deontay Johnson, Pickens, Freiermuth, none of those guys from a skill perspective, position perspective, is one of the best players in the National Football League at their position. You look at the offensive line. Moore Jr., Dotson, Cole, Daniels, Chuck Okorafor, Green. None of those guys scream best at their position in the National Football League. You have on the offensive side of the football, no one, maybe Najee Harris. And when you compare Najee Harris to the rest of the running backs of the AFC North, Pickens, the Cleveland running backs, the running back room, in Baltimore, hell, Lamar Jackson as a running back, Najee doesn't rank high as well either. So when you're ranking a roster and you're looking at the offensive side of the ball, it's got to be low. You have no Pro Bowl caliber players. And when you look at the offensive side of the roster, you have no particular player on the roster on the offensive side of football who is best in the division. There's no way you could say that Claypool, Deontay Johnson, and Pickens are the best in the division at their positions. So when you think of it that way, it's surprising that it's 22. And the reason why it's 22 is because of Cam Hayward and TJ Watt and Minka Fitzpatrick. Those three guys, and this is a great juxtaposition when I'm talking about a roster and I'm talking about how it gets ranked. The reason why Buffalo is probably number one at the height of the National Football League in terms of roster is Diggs. You've got Diggs, you've got the quarterback, you've got the outstanding cornerback, and you've got some outstanding guys on both sides of the ball. When you look at the Steelers' defense, the guys that raise the tide, are TJ Hayward and Minka Fitzpatrick. That's it. Because even on the defensive side of the ball, Wormley, Alualu, Highsmith, Jack, Bush, Witherspoon, Wallace, Cam Sutton, Edmonds, those guys are just guys. And Hayward, the scheme, TJ Watt, and Minka raised the tide. So if you didn't have those guys, and of course we can't play the if you didn't have those guys, you can't play that game. But those are the guys that raised the tide for this football team. That's why, in some respects, I'm extremely excited about this particular football team in this year. I really want to see the coaching of this team. I want to see how this team progresses and improves over time. I want to see this team grow. I want to see the young guys grow because I think if they get the offensive line piece right, they're on and popping. They're on and popping. So before I jump into the skill position rankings from Ted Wynn from The Athletic, I do want to get you guys in the chat giving your perspective on, do you think the rankings are fair that ESPN had? 6, 8, 12, and 22. I think they're spot on. And I think that the rankings are so low for the Steelers because the Steelers don't have any guys, any studs, except for possibly Najee on the offensive side of the football. They don't have one guy on the offense that you would consider the best in the division. So when you look at it on paper, the roster is going to be ranked fairly low. Now, that doesn't mean a hill of beans. That doesn't mean that guys won't play above what we think they are and what they're going to play. It doesn't mean that the coaching staff won't put them in the proper scheme, in the proper position to make plays. It doesn't mean that guys won't play over their head. It doesn't mean that when guys have an opportunity to step out and start, that they won't become the guys and be the guy. So you always have to take it with a grain of salt, and you have to just wait and see and figure. And the time will tell when the season is played what guys will be. But when you just look at it on paper, it's pretty tough. And let me jump into the comment from Mel. He says, "Sure, they are fair when you're just looking at paper. Yes, on paper, the Steelers have the worst roster." Yeah, I think it's fair. I mean, especially when you look at Cleveland. Cleveland is solid at the quarterback position if Watson plays. They're good at wide receiver. They're good at running back. They have a solid tight ends. They're outstanding on the offensive line. They're solid at corner, and they have an elite pass rusher. I mean, they have an elite quarterback, an elite corners, an elite pass rusher, and an elite offensive line. I mean, that alone. But I think when you look at this stuff on paper, I think which raises it really high and how they do these rankings is just the quarterback position. I mean, it's just the quarterback position. And Mel also said, I agree with you coaching wise. Our offensive roster is unproven. When you look at the coaching, I think the two best coaches in the division are clearly Wags Harbaugh and Tomlin. Those are the two best coaches in the division. Let me see any other and Mal said it best as well. And we might end the discussion on that comment. No home run hitters on offense. And he's absolutely right. There are no home run hitters on offense. No home run hitters. And Ali Howard Species said, I live behind enemy lines. The entire world, besides Steeler fans, know Big Ben was holding us back, singing his best, doing his best Eli Manning impersonation. Yeah, Ben was not very good last year. And big up to Claude Bishop. And Claude, is this Claude that I talked to a couple of weeks ago? If it is, say yes in the chat. Big up to Claude. If it is Claude, thank you for the participation. And joining us, my man, my mellow. Get on the mic because I know you eat Jello. What's up, Neil?
Nothing. I'm just off on our schedule, apparently.
Hey, man, no worries. It is. And big up to my guy, Claude. Big up to my man, Claude. Dallas Cowboy fan from Philadelphia. So you know Claude is crazy. So big up to Claude. So, Neil, we were talking about, before we jump back into the main topic of the show, and thank you for hopping on. No worries, big guy. It's 4th of July weekend. I know you got some barbecue on the grill. I know you're about to do it really well this weekend.
Laying the stuff out.
Yes.
I was all scheduled for an 11 a.m. Central start time here. My bad.
No worries, man. No worries. And big up to Mel. See Mel giving you your props. Neil, the man, the myth, the legend.
That's right, Mel.
And what's on the 4th of July menu for you? My wife is just doing desserts. What you got going in the great state of Minnesota?
I need desserts. No, I've got some sirloin burgers that are going to go tonight, and we'll probably do the traditional hamburger hot dog thing Saturday and Sunday, and then I've got steaks set up for Monday. That might get changed to Sunday though. We'll see. Depends on how much I want them at the time and what we're doing. We have tentative plans, a couple different things going on. Kind of depends on when we'll be back. I did happen to just read about a potato salad recall at the local grocery store, which is borderline suspicion of terrorism in my mind. If you don't have potato salad on the 4th of July, I'm not going to be happy. I need some dessert though. Send me some pics of that at least.
Yes, I will. So we started off the program talking about ESPN's roster ranking of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and we're going to jump back into the main topic of the program because we got Neil on about, is Tomlin giving up play calling duties? And according to ESPN, they ranked the rosters of the AFC North teams as follow. Cleveland was ranked 6th overall in the National Football League, and this is National Football League rankings. Cincinnati was 8, Baltimore was 12, and the Pittsburgh Steelers were 22nd. I surmise that the Steelers were that low, one, because they probably, if Watson plays, and it's looking like Watson may not play this season, but if and when he does play, the Steelers have the worst quarterback in the division, and they have absolutely no home run hitters on offense. On the defensive side of the ball, the reason why I thought that they were even as high as 22nd was because they arguably have 3 guys who could be considered the best at their position in the National Football League. In Cam the Man, Super TJ, and Minka, the highest paid safety in NFL history. And that is the reason why what's the cliche? I'm terrible with cliche about something, the water rises the tide and it brings the boats up, and
high tide rises all ships.
Yes. See, that's how bad
you're going for there.
Yes, that's how bad I am on cliches. So I think those 3 players made the Steelers as high as 22, because ironically, the Jets are 24. right? So, and we know the Jets are terrible. So, do you think those rankings of the three rosters in the division one first are fair? And do you think the 22nd is about right for the Steelers?
It's tough. I think the division rankings are right. Um, that's not going to be a popular consensus among this audience. I understand that, but Cleveland is stacked. If Watson is in there, and I agree with you, I think they're going under the assumption that he will be. Um, that is obviously not even close to set in stone. You're looking at least half the season he's going to be out. But Cleveland is a very very good team on an individual basis. We'll see what happens with them the rest of the way, but they're number one in the division for sure. Cincinnati, I would give them the edge over Baltimore for sure, just simply because they have a quarterback that is coming into his own as a real all angles, all throws, all downs threat, along with the best receiver in the division, the best trio of receivers in the division, and a defense that nearly won him a Super Bowl last year. So Cincinnati being where they are, I definitely think is legitimate.
And a very good running back, and a very
and
good
a very
running
good
back
running
in
back.
Mixon.
Yes. Putting that together, Baltimore falling in third behind that seems definitely fair. 12 overall, I think, is interesting for them. I'm not sure they're that good. They've got a lot of new pieces coming in. We'll see how Baltimore brings all of that together. I would have a world of confidence in John Harbaugh to be able to navigate through a new center and a new free safety. That's not anything to sneeze at. You can't just expect a high level results immediately from rookies like that. But Baltimore, they're always a good team. I'm not sure this is the most talented Baltimore team we've seen. This is still a team that, unlike anybody else in the NFL, can't seem to evaluate the wide receiver position to save their lives. I'm not sure what they're trying to do there. I didn't think that Hollywood Brown was all that great anyway, but they don't have two of them. They've got a second-year guy, Rashad Bateman, one of my favorite players in college coming into the draft last year, who has not proven himself to this point. I think he can be a reliable target for him. They don't have a big play guy catching the ball either. So I'm not sure how good Baltimore will really be offensively. We'll have to see how that comes together. And yeah, I mean, really process of elimination. I think the Steelers are behind the rest of them when it comes to that. As far as ranking the entire league, I mean that's a feat. We do things like that on the NFL Wire Network on USA Today sports media group, and they're not the easiest tasks in the world to do. So claiming accuracy, I think, is beside the point. It's really discussion more than anything. When you get into numbers like that across the entire league, it's really hard to evaluate all of those things. They don't all set up the same way. They're not all the same teams. A lot of them have, like I mentioned with Baltimore, new parts coming in. Pittsburgh, I would say, is one of those. But the reality is Pittsburgh does not have a proven quarterback, and teams that don't have proven quarterbacks tend to not have very good rosters. That's just the way it is.
Yep.
I can't say that it's unfair where we sit right now. I don't think, well, it's, how about this? It's definitely not going to be how the teams are going to rank at the end of the year. It never is. But Pittsburgh, where they are right now, and I really like Pittsburgh's defense. I think they're getting a bit underrated as far as what they're going to collectively be able to do with all the moves that they've made. I think the ranking more or less is fair. It wouldn't surprise me if they end up being, somewhere ranked around that. Would be what, the 10th, 11th, 12th pick in the draft, something like that. It wouldn't surprise me if they ended up there, but I don't think that they will. They'll play above what you'd think that they would be in June and July. I think they'll be better than that, but I definitely think they trail the three teams in the division.
Yeah, I think their coaching advantage will get them a win that you don't expect, like last year against Buffalo.
Yep.
And then they'll get a bounce or two where they get dominated by Tennessee, like in all statistical categories except for turnovers, and they win the game. They'll get a couple of games like that. Let me ask you. They also included in this article number rankings. And I don't know if they got this from PFF. This might have been ESPN stats and information.
They have their own
rankings. Yeah, they have their own rankings. And who do you think was the highest rated Steeler on the roster.
Highest rated Steeler on the roster. Is this based on last year?
Yes, based on last year. Outside of special teams players.
Last year, I'd say Cam. It wouldn't surprise me if it was Cam.
You're right on. Cam was the highest rated player at 90.8. So we're going to just make that 91. Surprisingly, TJ Watt was rated at 89.6. So we'll
Yeah, I
make
was going
that.
to say they'd be close. Cam just had some monster games over the first 10, 11, 12 games. Watt, I understand how many sacks Watt got and why in that ranking, if we look at that as gospel, Watt didn't finish far off of him, but it didn't stand out as much and as consistently as Cam did. Cam, I think he wore down by the end of the year. I don't think he was playing particularly well at the end. But I said this during the show last year when we were doing it, Lance. I legitimately thought Cam Hayward was a defensive player of the year for the first half of the season. I don't think anybody in the league played better than he did on the defensive side of the ball. So put all that together, yeah, I think that's fair. They're definitely. How about this? They are absolutely and without question the Steelers' two best players from last year. Absolutely, no doubt in my mind that's the case. There are some other decent players there. I don't think Minka played particularly well. There are a lot of reasons for that, but those two are absolutely their two best players.
I think snap to snap, Cam Hayward's the best player. I mean, and that might be. I don't know if that's a hot take. I don't know if that's controversial.
Can be.
I think it's just the nature of pass rushers.
That's fair.
You know, there are a lot of plays where pass rushers just have no impact. I mean, they're just getting stoned. You know, pass rushing is like Greg Luzinski back in the day for the Phillies. I mean, the guy hit 48 home runs or whatever. Him and
struck
Mike
out
Schmidt,
200 times.
But he struck out 225 times, right? But all you're going to remember is that he hit 240, hit 48 home runs, and had 135 RBIs. Whereas,
how about this? Wait, what would happen to a pass rusher when they play the Steelers? The quarterback gets rid of the ball in less than 2 seconds. They're not going to make an impact on the game. And a lot of teams, against a lot of teams, the Steelers would do just that. I think Seattle is a great example of Watt versus Cam as far as the height of one and kind of the height and the basement of another. Watt made a play in the first series of that game and then did nothing for the rest of the game until overtime when he just decided he didn't want to be on the field anymore. So we got 2 sacks and 2 plays and forced a fumble. And
yes, let's go.
Watt was the highlight of that game, but Cam was better overall by a healthy margin, in my opinion. It's just it's totally perspective. You know, it really just depends on how you want to look at it. Watt is the more impactful player.
Yes,
Cam, I think, is the better player, as you said, snap to snap.
Yeah, snap to snap. You know, Cam is like milk and good flour and a cake. You know, you need good eggs, good milk, good flour. TJ is the icing. TJ is the icing on a red velvet cake. If you don't put the icing,
not the vanilla icing.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? If you don't put that red velvet cream cheese frosting on a red velvet cake, it's just a chocolate cake that's red. I mean, that's what TJ Watt is.
Red velvet cake. I hate red velvet.
I'm not a
most
red velvet
overrated
cake fan.
dessert there is.
I agree.
But that cream cheese frosting, though, put that on like pumpkin bars. Oh man, I'll crush that whole pan. I go like diabetic when it comes to that.
Let's get your
dessert power rankings. We're doing this next week.
Yes, dessert power rankings next week. Let's get your thoughts in the chat. Red velvet cake, overrated or underrated? Or let's know. Just the question is red velvet cake overrated? I think red velvet cake is kind of overrated. Honestly, I agree with you.
I don't get the hype. I don't get the hype at all. Like, why would you choose this over regular chocolate cake? Like,
why would you choose that over pound cake? I mean, pound cake is
any cake, really.
Lemon pound cake is I like crust though. I'm a pie guy. But let's jump into another ranking. And this was rankings given by Ted Wynn, the outstanding guy that writes for The Athletic. Ted, I've been following Ted Wynn for years. He used to do stuff with the Raiders years ago. Brilliant. Breaking down a lot of film. Ted Wynn is great. I think Ted Wynn probably should be coaching. German chocolate cake is overrated. Absolutely. But I did used to eat German chocolate cake
stuff in there
at Neldham's, which was great. German chocolate cake, the right German chocolate cake is Uh, Corey Hatcher.
Poor Corey.
It's I. My wife makes a great red velvet cake, but it's not on my top 10. Hopefully she doesn't listen to the show, Corey,
Well,
because you
here's an
won't be
interesting
getting any more
dilemma.
slices.
If you have 10 cakes that are worthy of inclusion on that list and your wife makes one that isn't in there, I can't tell if you eat a truckload of cakes that I've never heard of before or your wife never stops baking. But it seems like that could be a problem that gets fixed. Tell her you don't like red velvet cake. I mean,
Yeah.
you have a top 10. It doesn't even enter the top 10. Why is it being made?
Yes, Corey. I think she's
Wow.
making red velvet
Corey,
for
does she care about
herself.
you?
Yeah, yeah, Corey, man. Tell her to make a lemon pound cake. Come on now, or a caramel
That
cake,
sounds good.
or
Lemon
something.
pound cake.
Lemon pound cake. Come on, man. Come on, man.
There's an underrated cake.
Okay, let's get off of cake. So
Not
Ted
hungry at all
Wynn,
right now.
Ted Wynn rated the Steelers' offensive skill players as the 10th best in the National Football League. Now, his rankings were, he gave this color scheme. So pink was elite, blue was very good, green was an above average starter, and gray was average. And for the Steelers, he has a black category because he could not rank Pickens. So not surprisingly, the Steelers had no pink skill players.
Nope.
And he excluded the quarterback, right? He excluded the quarterback. So
that's a good thing.
And so
safely say that's not pink either.
Right. So he rated Chase Claypool as green, an above average starter. Okay. Deontay Johnson was blue, very good. Pickens was black, no ranking. Freiermuth was green, an above average starter. And Najee Harris was blue, very good. So looking at these players, I would disagree with him for one particular player. I would make Chase Claypool as average. I think his physical dimensions are very good, but his performance on the field is average. I agree with Deontay Johnson as blue. I would make Pat Freiermuth gray as well. I don't think Pat Freiermuth did anything for me to think that he's an above average starter, because to me, if you're an above average starter, if your play incrementally gets a little bit better,
done more than
you have to have done more, right? So it's like
really do anything.
Like if you're an above average starter, yeah, like if you get a little bit better, you're probably teetering on Pro Bowl, right? So I don't think he's there. Najee, he gave Najee a very good. I would give Najee a green, above average. I don't think Najee is very good. So I think he has a little bit wrong. I don't know if the Steelers skill group, in my opinion, is 10. When I say in my head, Claypool, Johnson, Pickens, Freiermuth, Harris, it's not followed by, oh my, it's followed by, oh no. So
more okay for me.
Yeah, like, oh, really? So
okay, let's look at it like this. I don't think Wynn is looking at this as much based on what we've seen, and as more he's looking at it more from the perspective of what they could be, what he expects them to be. If that's the case, okay, I still think that's kind of high, but he can't possibly be looking at last season and coming up with that. There's no way you could tell me what you have seen of Chase Claypool, especially in 2020, suggested to you that he's a higher than average level player. He's not. There's just nothing about him that is. And there is nobody in the league that is getting more consistent afterburn from his combine measurements, not even the 40, not even, a epic performance or anything like that. His size and his speed, those things together, his spider graph is still paying bills for him. Despite the fact he is a mediocre player, he shows mediocre footwork, he has mediocre hands, he tracks a ball at a mediocre level. His average defined, in my opinion. He barely made plays last year. I'm not saying that he's garbage and they should get rid of him. And I'm not even bringing up the Vikings fiasco. I'm talking very simply about his production on the field is not good. It just isn't. I mean, again, not a bum, but he's not a high-level player. He's not somebody that you should highlight more than anybody else within this offense. Najee and Freiermuth were rookies, okay? If we want to project out their careers, and there are people I have legitimately seen comparing Freiermuth after a year in the NFL to Travis Kelce, which is laughable, offensive to Travis Kelce. Nothing we have seen of Freiermuth at this point suggests he is that guy. Doesn't mean he's garbage. Just means he's not at that level where he is today. If Ted thinks he's going to be, okay. Deontay is the one who I think is fairly ranked in all of that. I'm okay with where Deontay is. I think Deontay will have another good season. I think he's going to get paid high level, whether that's with the Steelers or elsewhere. He's going to get paid on that. The one to watch, Lance, is Pickens. He's got the most upside of anybody on that list by far. And I think he was the best college player skill-wise, the most translatable skill from college into the NFL among that group. Depending on how they use him, depending on how he takes to the offense and what he is showing everybody, I think he might end up being the second most targeted guy on the Steelers. That doesn't mean that he's going to be, but he's going to be a playmaker, if nothing else. They're going to try to get him the ball deeper down the field. He can be the deep option that Claypool just hasn't been, and maybe even move him out of the way toward the end of the season. Let's see how it develops. So Pickens has way more ability as a wide receiver than Claypool does. And really, I'm excited to watch him more than anything else.
Who do you think was the number one group that he had in the National Football League?
Oh man, there's skill groups are just loaded nowadays. I'll
give you a hint. It's a skill group in the AFC North.
Cincinnati would be probably my guess, or Cleveland, depending on Watson. Right? Well, no, I can't say that. Probably Cincinnati.
Yeah. He had Cincinnati number one. He had Jamar Chase as a pink level player, which means he's elite.
Jamar Chase is so good.
And then he had
unbelievable.
And then he had Higgins, Boyd, and Joe Mixon as guys in blue, which is very good.
That's fair. I'm good with that.
When you have a skill group, and that's why when you're comparing rosters, that's why the Steelers roster is 22nd and the Bengals roster is 6th, is that the Bengals have on offense Higgins, Chase, Boyd, Mixon. You have 4 guys on offense with Burrow that can wreck you if you're not playing good defense. You can give up a 40 burger quick.
Twice.
And they gave up 2 40 burgers twice. I mean,
combined score of those 2 games was what, 968 to 7 or something like that.
8,000 to 26. And I had
never competed against that team. Never stopped those guys.
They absolutely destroyed them. Let's see, who else do they have in terms of, they have Miami. He has Miami as the number 2 skill group.
Interesting.
Interesting enough, he has San Francisco as the number 4 skill group. He has them with 3 pink players in Debo, Kittle, and Juszczyk. When you look at some of these rosters, I mean, it's just some of these rosters in the National Football League are laughably good on the offensive side of football with dudes, with studs. But let's jump into the main topic of the program, and I'm sorry that we're getting into it 43 minutes in, and that is there was a report out there that Mike Tomlin is giving up play calling duties. The first thing I want to ask you, Neil, first thing I want to do is demystify play calling, because I think there is a thought that when you call plays, there's this magic crystal ball that you just pulling plays out of the ethos, and here's the play, here's the play, here's the play. And I think what I think is lost is that, does it make a difference? Answer this question to me. If you are instrumental in building the plan on game day, how much does it matter who's actually calling the plays?
I think that question is probably answered on a team-to-team basis, and maybe even within side of the ball from team to team. I don't feel, and this is my experience talking to a lot of these people, Play calling is definitely the big swing and dick position for a coach. It's what pays. You have the responsibility. You've got the capital. But putting together the plan for the game is really more of what a coordinator is doing. When you have, say, a 600-page playbook, you are not flipping through that during a game and calling something. You're not pushing B and down together to call a play either. So many things are fluid. And nowadays, in particular, with the amount of receivers who are on the field, the amount of sub packages that come into it, the amount of blended defenses that we see, more than anything, plays are changing and evolving as the play goes on. If you start with the offense, I just had a long conversation with a colleague of mine yesterday about this. The offensive coordinator of a team with a good veteran group, the quarterback who gets it, an offensive line that has experience playing together within the system they're in, they're going to the huddle with probably the coordinator's calling in 3 plays.
Yeah, 3 plays. That's what I've always heard,
So
3.
they're calling a play, but the quarterback is the one really calling it. At the line, quarterback is going to survey what's going on, and they're going to make a call based on that. And a lot of times that call is a slight check to something, or it's an option route, or this guy is going to sit back or go hot or something like that. They're adding in variations, and it's those variations that make an offense go nowadays. You know, it's not 32 dive, 33 dive. It's not, 1960s football. They're doing so many different things. A quarterback is they're moving the pieces around, and the general construct of what they're looking at is based more on the personnel that they anticipate they're going against. So the coordinator is making a call after having watched the sideline to see what defensive players are coming out, being told by spotters in their ear that they usually have a guy that indicates this package is on the field. So if they tell him 56, they know that they're going to be a nickel. So the coordinator is thinking over the nickel package plays that they put together. That's what those laminate sheets are. They go into a game with maybe like 75 plays that they've scripted, that they've gone over. If they have to dip into something else, they will. And it's usually something they've run a bunch during the season, but they're not using the entire playbook. And most of it is going to change when they're at the line of scrimmage anyway. Calling the play, yes, it's important to know what you have. It's important to know what you're capable of, but all of that is stuff that is done during the week. That's what they practice. Okay. That is what football practice is in the NFL. They are going over their scripted plays. On the defensive side, you don't get the benefit as much. Typically the offensive side is putting their guys onto the field first. Defense is sort of responding to that. On defense, you're trying to match up as best you can, but you have to worry about no huddle. That's a big thing nowadays. Peyton Manning made a thing of this. The Ravens begged Joe Flacco to understand these concepts well enough and never really did. You go into no huddle, that means the defense can't substitute. They don't have the opportunity to do that. So you're keeping that package on the field. Defensively, that means you have to prepare to get no huddled by a lot of teams. So you have to be versatile. And within that versatility, you're keeping the same players with different assignments in different packages. So if you have the infamous hybrid linebacker safety that the Steelers have been killing themselves to find over the last decade, you're able to go big or small depending on what the offense has. Calling that in the heat of the moment, there is absolutely a skill to it. I don't want to act like there isn't, but it is not nearly as important as knowing that the personnel on the other side, who they have, what they're going to do. Prepare yourself to be balanced as well as coverage heavy or tough against the run. The down and distance, you can call that out there, but nowadays, 3rd and 2 is still a passing down. So you can't just go jumbo when you're in short yardage. They can throw out of that now. You have to know your people. You have to know the opponent's personnel and what they're doing, and you have to prepare your team to adjust to what they're doing. That is done during the week, not on game day. So calling the plays themselves, honestly, Lance, and I'm sorry I've rambled way too long on this.
No, I think
Terrell Austin's going to call the plays because that was probably part of what Terrell Austin needed to be the defensive coordinator. He told him, I've got other opportunities. I want to call plays. If you hire me, I'm going to call plays. If Tomlin's going to do it, no thanks. I'll continue in this role. If you want to get rid of me, fine, whatever. They want that because, frankly, that's how you get head coaching jobs. You need to be able to
Right.
say you called the plays. Whether that's right or not is irrelevant, because it all comes down to the owner at that point of who
And,
they want. And
and he,
as well as I do, the issue that Terrell Austin has as far as becoming a head coach in the
right.
NFL is not going to be helped if he's not calling plays. So
Here's the interesting thing about calling plays, because it was interesting. I was listening to the Arthur Moat show, and I think that I forget which linebacker they had on. Is that in a press conference, and Tomlin doesn't necessarily do it. A coach can allude to the fact that he's calling the plays, and he might not actually be calling the
yep.
plays.
Yeah, the coach can
So
say whatever the hell he wants.
so a coach can say whatever they want, and if it doesn't go well, like a coach can take credit or not. He can shield you from credit, or I mean, he can shield you from criticism, or he can take your credit. Either way, and there's not much you can do because you
I'll
know
bet Tomlin does both, to be honest.
and you only have one day to speak. I think if you're a coordinator,
Yep.
right?
Thursdays for the Steelers,
And they don't have to, and they don't have to make you available. Let me jump into, I
they
think,
also
some
don't
really,
speak after games. Is the big
yes,
point
and
that
they
Moats
don't
was
speak
making.
after
The
games.
head coach is the only coach who speaks after games.
Let me jump into some great comments from Corey Hatcher, and I want you to address them. I'm gonna read the first three because it sounds like Corey is a high school coach, and he says primary play calling duties typically is a collaborative effort. He said you get input coming from multiple sources.
Yep.
As a matter of fact, even at high school, we might call a play, but there are so many adjustments that change it.
And that's the stuff you teach. That's what you're coaching, really. So you have a base. You have it's. I'm not going to come up with a very good example, but 3-4 eagle. That's what the Steelers used to call back in the day. That was their 60 base was their base look. This is what they're in. Their assignments then depend on what another team is doing, which is as simple as this guy lines up here versus there. That's where the linebacker goes. Those are all individual checks that they make. That's not a play. So it really, you're calling out a coverage. You're calling out an alignment. And from there, your players need to know what the opponent is doing to determine what their assignment is on that play. On defense, on offense, it's about coordination. On defense, it's about communication. You have to talk to one another on defense so everybody knows what everyone else is going to be doing. The best defenses do that better than anybody else. It's not a play calling thing. It's how you structure what your defense is and how you go about coaching the players to know what their specific assignments are.
And Corey said, yes, he's a high school football coach in NorCal. In the chat, Corey, I'm in NorCal. What high? I'm interested to hear what high school you coach at, Corey. Also, the other thing Corey wrote was defensively, we have built-in adjustments to change the front, the coverage, blitzes, and line slants,
and
etc.
that's all based on offensive alignment, right, Corey? Because you're going to change based on what they're doing. You don't know if they're going to come out with some weird thing that you haven't seen before, but if you know your discipline, you know where your gap is, you know what your responsibility is within the structure of what is called, you adjust to it. That's defensive football. You have to know what the opponent is doing.
And Corey agreed.
It's always a reaction.
Here's the other thing. The last thing I want to say before we go ahead and conclude this show. And he said formation, etc. So he agreed with you. Is that here's the one thing I think I don't know if we've missed, but we just have not said is you need smart ass players.
Yep.
You need really smart ass players.
Something that isn't discussed because it is not as measurable as you think that it would be.
Exactly.
It's really hard to say. The Wonderlic test doesn't do it. It's something totally different. If you know football, and this comes down to the linebacker position, and this is why the Steelers invest big money in inside linebackers. They have a certain level of football knowledge that they want, and they will pay for the guy that might not be as athletic, and they'll put them out there because they know what's going on, and they can line everybody up. They know where everybody should go. You see them coming over, smacking one dude on the right hip to get him to move over a gap. The inside linebacker, the middle linebacker, tends to be the captain of your defense for that reason. They know everything that's going on, and it's invaluable. You can't play with a stupid player at linebacker. Thank you, Devin Bush. We saw that last year.
And this is why calling the plays, yes, is important, preparing your football team during the week to adjust on the fly is even more important, particularly on the defensive side of football. You have to be very intelligent. You have to read your keys. You have to be able to adjust, and guys have to be on the same page, snap in, snap out, to know what's going on. That's why when you watch football games, particularly with bad teams, you see a shitload of blown assignments. You see a bunch of blown assignments, particularly on big plays. I mean,
You
a
look
lot of
back,
times,
the Steelers in 2013 were a great example of that. And with all due respect to Larry Foote took over that job from James Farrior that year. And James Farrior is legitimately one of the best linebackers the Steelers have ever had. One of the most underrated players they ever had. We don't give that guy enough credit for how good he was, how smart he was. It was a huge loss. Foote didn't get everything yet. They had so many blown run fills, basic assignments up front. They gave up a 40-plus yard run every game. And this was a team that didn't give up 100 yards rushing for like 3 straight years prior to that. They didn't have that level of coordination. That's why they went out and got Shazier. And then they cut Foote the next year, which was kind of a surprise because you had all this investment in him. Now he's gone. He's still bitter about that. Go ask him. But it's you need to have smarts to do all of that. And a lot of it is you have to set up your run defense. The gaps need to be covered. And there were plenty of times that season the gaps simply weren't covered. The quarterback looks at it, sees it. Well, we'll just change this then. Give the ball to that guy. He's going to go for 40 yards untouched.
yeah. So I think, again, not to say play calling isn't important, because it is, and there's a skill, there's a nuance to it, definitely, for sure. And it's important, just the fact from what you said, that play calling is the easiest thing to falsely, incorrectly identify, which in turn makes guys seem like wonderkins or dummies or whatever. Because the one thing that you do not know is the play call could be right, the execution is terrible. Guy blows an assignment, you've got it called dead on. You know exactly what's coming. You've got the right call. Guy does the wrong thing.
Corey's a coach. I'm sure there are other coaches out here that are listening. What's one thing that you will always hear coaches say that just doesn't ever really seem to be understood the way that it should be? Call wasn't played. The call was not made to fail. Okay.
Yes,
That seems
absolutely.
stupid. They didn't call it because it was a bad play call. It didn't work. It didn't get executed. And they're in a passive way blaming the players. But at the same time, players play, coaches coach. Okay. If the players were perfect, you have probably a 0-0 tie every game. It's not the point. You have to execute what's called. And the players have to trust in the coaches to be able to do that. Offensively, I feel this. I'm not sure if every coach agrees with me on this, and probably at the high school level, this isn't as relevant. At the pro level, though, offensive play calling is more. It's more of the function of the success of the offense than defensive play calling is. I'm not trying to minimize it. I just mean defense. The basic task of defensive football is reacting. You have to react to what's going on. Yes, you want to attack as well, but you are reacting to a route that's run. You are reacting to the drop of a quarterback.
Yes.
You have to react to that because you don't know. Offense knows what it's doing. They have a specific plan based on what you're doing. So they are the ones who are proactive. They're attacking you. This is why it's called offense versus defense. So the play calling piece of it, while in my opinion, the most important part is always reviewing the tape, knowing your opponent, knowing your own personnel, and coaching what you want to do. Calling it is a byproduct of that. It is very, very important, but the play calling to me represents a long train of work that went into it. And I think the value of calling a play is more important on the offensive side than defense, because defense is going to adjust based on what the offense is showing and then what the offense is doing. Match zone under Dick LeBeau is a great example of that. Match zone basically means you're playing in zone unless guys do certain things, and you might take them in man. Number one rule of cornerbacks, especially in the NFL, if you're on the outside and the guy, the receiver comes off the line and takes you outside, you're staying with him. There's no zone for that. Okay. You don't just drop off while a guy's streaking down the field because it's not in your zone anymore. You are in man until he breaks. Then you go into a zone. That's match zone defense. So you are constantly reacting to what the opponent is doing. And calling that is not as important as understanding when you need to do it, which is completely up to the personnel and the skill of the other team.
Here's a funny thing too, is because as we conclude the show, it won't matter one way or another for Steeler fans. If the Steeler defense goes out and gets hammered, it'll be Tomlin calling the plays anyway.
Ironically, Brian Flores' first game, for example, first 2 games in the NFL. I think he gave up 100 in back-to-back weeks. The first one I think was to Arizona, and the second one was to Baltimore. Their defense got completely destroyed, and they looked like they had absolutely no clue what was going on. Yes, Flores was calling the plays, but new coach, so sometimes you got to work some things out. Didn't look real good for him early on. And then he traded Minka on top of that. So rough start to Flores' career in Miami. Don't think he should have been fired. In fact, he shouldn't have been. If he rebounded from where he was to where he finished, that's pretty impressive. You got to like that. But it's not always about the play call. It's about understanding what is called and what needs to be done. And I think Flores had kind of a rough indoctrination in the NFL.
But with that, we're going to get out and conclude the show. And it seems like clearly in the chat that red velvet cake is definitely overrated. And we're going to talk
seems
about
like it just seems like something that it's gilded, it's made to be fancy for no reason at all, but everyone thinks it's like high level. It's like, it's not.
Yeah, it's this southern,
it's the Baltimore Ravens of cake.
It's this southern thing that got, had this mystique in and of itself. But with that, I hope everybody brings in the July 4th weekend very safely. Thank you, Claude, for hopping onto the program. Claude, make sure you like and subscribe. Big up to Claude. Known Claude for years. Saw him recently a couple of weeks ago. Good to see him again. Glad to see when guys are healthy and having fun and enjoying their lives. So it's great. It was great to see Claude. But also, everybody bringing the 4th of July weekend very well. Be safe. Eat a ton of desserts. Come back with your list of best cakes. We want top 5 best cakes. We definitely want top 5 best cakes. I listed some of mine. Lemon pound cake, caramel cake. I do like German chocolate cake.
Yellow cake, chocolate frosting.
Yellow chocolate,
vanilla
yellow
cake, vanilla frosting.
Exactly.
Very
yellow
good.
Cake, chocolate frosting, the Duncan Hines box.
But
I like,
exactly, like fresh out of the oven. Oh,
yes. But I like scratch cakes because my wife does make cakes from scratch. So the texture, when you start eating scratch cakes, box cakes are a little bit light. They don't taste as good. But yellow cake, chocolate cake is awesome. 7-Up cake is good. Sakatumi cake. All those cakes.
I haven't had 7-Up cake in a long time.
All those cakes are great.
Thing.
But anyway, we're going to stop talking about cake. We're going to let you go eat some cake.
Go eat some cake.
We're going to let you go eat
Get out of
some
here.
cake. And anyway, we're out of here. And as always, tune in, tell a friend, and subscribe.